The Civil Rights Movement sought to abolish racial segregation and discrimination in the United States from 1954 to 1968. The movement was characterized by nonviolent civil disobedience. Civil disobedience included bus boycotts in Montgomery, Alabama, sit-ins in Greensboro, North Carolina, and Nashville, Tennessee, and a protest march from Selma, Alabama to the state capitol in Montgomery, Alabama. The Civil Rights Movement started in 1954. At that time, Thurgood Marshall brought a lawsuit to the U.S. Supreme Court known as Brown v. Board of Education. Linda Brown wanted to attend an all-white school several blocks from her home in Topeka, Kansas. The court agreed that Linda should be allowed to attend the all-white school according to the 14th Amendment. The emotional spark that propelled the civil rights movement forward was the murder of Emmett Till. In 1955, when Emmett was 14 years old, he traveled on a train from Chicago to Money, Mississippi to spend the summer visiting his cousins. At Bryant's grocery store, Emmett was accused of interacting inappropriately with a white woman. Emmett was abducted and brutally murdered on August 28, 1955. At Emmett's funeral, his mother Mamie insisted on an open casket. Mamie said, "I wanted the world to see what they did to my baby." Thousands of people viewed the body and numerous photographs circulated in newspapers and magazines. People were shocked and horrified at the sight of the body. Several months later, in December 1955, Rosa Parks was arrested in Montgomery, Alabama, for her refusal to give up her bus seat to a white person. Yet before Rosa Parks, a woman by the name of Mary Fair Burks made a significant contribution to the civil rights movement in Montgomery, Alabama. In 1946, Mary brought together 40 women who resided in Montgomery and formed the Women's Political Council. She created this group due to poor treatment and a wrongful arrest that she had experienced. Most of the women that came to her meeting had similar experiences. Rosa Parks' refusal to give up her seat and subsequent arrest sparked outrage in the black community of Montgomery. This movement became known as the Montgomery Bus Boycott, and its influence quickly spread across the country. In Arkansas, Daisy Bates closely followed the events of Emmett Till's murder and the Montgomery bus boycott. Daisy and her husband, L.C. Bates, published the Arkansas State Press, a newspaper they started in 1941. The paper was dedicated to the furtherance of civil rights in Arkansas. Furthermore, in 1953, Daisy was elected president of the Arkansas branch of the NAACP. She was fully committed to integrating the Little Rock public school system. In the fall of 1957, the black students selected to attend Little Rock Central High School were Melba Patello Bills, Minnie Jean Brown, Elizabeth Eckford, Ernest Green, Gloria Ray Callmark, Claretta Walls Lanier, Thelma Mothershed, Terrence Roberts, and Jefferson Thomas. These students became known as the Little Rock Nine. Fierce opposition from the Arkansas governor contributed to riots outside Little Rock Central High School. President Eisenhower responded by sending 1,200 soldiers from Fort Campbell, Kentucky, to escort the Little Rock Nine. By the end of the school year, Ernest Green successfully graduated. Women from all over the South participated in civil rights activism. They were among the organizers of lunch counter sit-ins and freedom rides. Women were jailed and put their lives at risk while pushing the boundaries of the acceptable norms of behavior for Southern women. Irene Morgan was an early activist fighting for bus desegregation. Irene was a 27-year-old factory worker and mother of two. She was traveling from Virginia to Baltimore in July 1944. Morgan, recovering from a miscarriage, was sitting in the colored section of a Greyhound bus. When asked to give up her seat for a white couple, she refused. The bus driver stopped and called the authorities. When the sheriff's deputy arrived with an arrest warrant, Irene tore it up and threw it out the window. She then kicked the deputy in the groin. Irene was charged with resisting arrest and breaking the laws of the Commonwealth of Virginia. Thurgood Marshall accepted Irene's case on behalf of the NAACP and appealed the case to the U.S. Supreme Court. Marshall argued that segregation within interstate travel violated the U.S. Constitution. The U.S. Supreme Court sided with Irene and ruled to desegregate interstate travel. Diane Nash was one of the women instrumental in organizing the Nashville sit-ins. As a member of the Tennessee Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, Nash not only organized sit-ins, Nash negotiated with restaurant owners to desegregate lunch counters. Although she was arrested on numerous occasions, she never tired in her fight for desegregation and integration. In fact, Diane Nash later rallied students to continue the Freedom Rides despite the danger and violence endured by Freedom Riders. The women who participated in the civil rights movement were everyday women, white and black, mothers and students, young and old. They organized, protested, and risked their lives. For example, Lee Chase defied segregation laws at her restaurant and hosted events for Martin Luther King Jr. and Thurgood Marshall. In February 1965, a demonstration for voting rights at the courthouse in Marion, Alabama, went from peaceful to violent. State troopers beat and clubbed marchers. A 26-year-old African-American man named Jimmy Lee Jackson was shot and killed. Jackson's unfair death ultimately brought the fight for civil rights to Selma. In response to Jackson's death, King and the Southern Christian Leadership Conference planned a protest march from Selma to the state capitol in Montgomery. A group of around 600 people, including many activists, set out from Selma on Sunday, March 7, 1965. This day would later be known as Bloody Sunday. The march began at Brown Chapel in Selma, and the group crossed over Edmund Pettus Bridge. Alabama state troopers were waiting for the marchers. A brutal scene erupted. The scene was televised and horrified many Americans. As a result, Martin Luther King called for help. Hundreds of Americans, black and white, quickly came to Selma and joined the protest. One of the Americans that came to Selma was a 39-year-old Detroit resident named Viola Lusso. After hearing Reverend King's call for help, Viola told her husband this was everybody's fight. Viola reached out to the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, which tasked her with delivering aid to various locations. James Orange warned Viola of the danger involved in making trips to and from Montgomery. Later, when Viola was stopped at a red light, a car with 4 members of the local KKK pulled up beside her. When they saw her, a white woman, and a black man in a car together, they followed her. Overtaking her car, they shot directly at Viola, killing her with 2 gunshots to the head. Her car ran into a ditch and crashed into a fence. Currently, Viola is the only white woman honored at the Montgomery Civil Rights Memorial. A marker was also placed at the site of Viola's death on U.S. Highway 80, about 20 miles east of Selma, Alabama. A few years later, on April 4, 1968, at 6:05 in the evening, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated. King was shot while standing on a balcony outside his room at the Lorraine Motel in Memphis, Tennessee. He was in Memphis for a march that supported striking sanitation workers. 4 days later, Coretta Scott King led the march through downtown Memphis. Although friends urged Coretta not to travel to Memphis, she ignored the warning. It was important for Coretta that her husband's work not go unfinished. Coretta said, "I was impelled to come. How many men must die before we can really have a free and true and peaceful society?" A funeral service was held for Dr. King the next day in Atlanta. Coretta Scott King died from complications due to ovarian cancer. Her funeral was attended by several presidents and heads of state. She is buried alongside her husband in Atlanta, Georgia. Their burial site is located on the grounds of the King Center.